Hello students, welcome to Royal Palace PU College Jamkhandi online classes. My name is Sanjay sir and I'll be teaching you biology. Today we'll be starting a new chapter of ecology, and that is PUC second year chapter number 14, the ecosystem. Like organisms and populations, this chapter is also very interesting to understand. Some topics are asked even in the NEET examination also. As far as theory point is concerned, this is easiest one. Like all the topics of mine, once again, I am dividing this chapter also into different subtopics. You'll be seeing those subtopics on the screen. Whatever the points that I say here, all are important as far as NEET examination is concerned. So please follow my video with as patience as possible. Note down each and every point. I'll go with the NCERT syllabus. Whatever that is present in the NCERT textbook, each and every single line I'll read and I'll finish it. To start with, the today's topic is Introduction to Ecosystem. There are some basic points, but the first basic thing is who coined the term ecosystem. There was a scientist called as A.G. Tansley, an ecologist person who coined the term ecosystem. Now coming to the definition of ecosystem. What do you mean by an ecosystem? Ecosystem, it is one of a physical property, a physical place, a geographical place, a system wherein which the living organisms, they interact among the non-living things. Living organisms in the sense you can consider them as the plants, animals, microbes, etc. And interaction among the abiotic factors or non-living things are water, light, temperature, soil, etc. The responses and the interactions among these two I have already explained a lot in my previous chapter. If you want or if you have any confusions regarding this, you can go to my previous chapter and study all those different topics. You'll come to one idea. Now once again I repeat the definition of ecosystem, that it is a geographical or physical place or ecological system of this globe wherein which the living organisms interact among the non-living things. Now if you consider the entire biosphere, what do you mean by biosphere? I say this one as the planet Earth. Now this planet Earth itself is called as a global ecosystem because in this global ecosystem itself so many individual ecosystems present. We'll be studying a lot relating to ecosystem, don't worry about it. But I'm just trying to explain what do you mean by ecosystem. Some ecosystems may be small, some ecosystems may be large. I just want to say that different ecosystems vary with respect to their sizes. It may be a small pond and it can reach to a bigger structure called as a forest, or it can reach to the sea also. So different ecosystems have got different sizes. Let us go to the another topic relating to this, that is the classification of ecosystem. Now what do you mean by classification? As I said that in this entire world, in this entire earth, we don't see the same kind of temperature, we don't see same kind of the water, we don't see the same kind of soil also. Different places are there, and with respect to those different places, different organisms have got their own different adaptations. So we need to understand that what kind of different varieties of ecosystems are there, how can you divide them, that is the classification of ecosystem. Okay, so on the screen you'll be getting a table or a classification chart. Try to observe it. Now this ecosystem has got divisions, and two divisions, and they are, one is natural ecosystem and another one is artificial ecosystem. What do you mean by natural ecosystem? Natural ecosystem is that ecosystem which is present naturally. No one has created it. The nature itself created these kind of ecosystems, and that too with respect to its own physical, chemical and biological adaptations. As far as artificial ecosystem is concerned, it is not created by the nature, it is created by the human beings only. As the name itself indicates, artificial. Okay, So as far as the natural ecosystems are concerned, it is once again divided into further categories. Try to understand and see that classification chart there. In case of natural ecosystem, they have divided this one into two categories. The first category as the terrestrial ecosystem and another one as the aquatic ecosystem. What do you mean by terrestrial ecosystem? Terrestrial ecosystem means the ecosystems which are present onto the land. Okay, onto the land. As far as aquatic ecosystems are those ecosystems which are present with respect to water or in water. Try to understand. So let us enter into terrestrial ecosystem and let's find out what are the different types of ecosystems present there. They have given some three examples such as forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, desert ecosystem. I'm giving photos of each and every single ecosystem. So pause it and try to visualize it and try to understand it. What kind of ecosystem and how actually they got named. In case of aquatic, once again they've divided that system into two categories. One is a freshwater aquasystem, another one is the saltwater aquasystem. A freshwater ecosystem and the marine saltwater ecosystem. You can easily understand now. This is not a rocket science wherein which an individual comes and tries to solve the equations. No, this is very simpler kind of topics we need to understand with respect to our own basic ideas, Now, in case of the freshwater ecosystem, he has given some of the examples such as ponds, lakes and streams. I repeat, pond is a freshwater ecosystem. What is a fresh and what is marine? Freshwater ecosystem is that ecosystem wherein which the concentration of salt is equivalent to 0 or very low. The marine aquasystem is that kind of ecosystem wherein which the concentration of salt is high. It is a simple sense. Okay, so as far as the examples of freshwater ecosystem, get them: ponds, lakes and streams. As far as the saltwater ecosystems are concerned, wetland, estuaries and finally marine. I'll give you the photos of each and every single ecosystems. I hope they are coming up already. Now the second type is the artificial ecosystem. This is also called as man-made ecosystem. The bestest example, first one as the aquarium I can say, and the second one I can give you as the crop land or irrigation land. Dear students, whatever the classification, whatever the lines or whatever the sentences that I'm saying right now, each and everything is from our NCERT textbook only. I'm not adding some more extra lines. Why? Because there are two types of explanations. Explanation number one, which includes the wholesale content of biology, even that can be from the reference books, that can be degree books, that can be some other books. And the another one is fixing to a particular topic. My intention is the second one. I don't want to explain so many things at one time. I just want to stick with my own syllabus so that I can deliver you whatever that is present in the NCERT textbook. That's it. I'm not going far away from this. Okay, I don't want to confuse your minds with adding so many extra unnecessary useless points. Okay, try to understand. Now this is about classification of ecosystem. Let's go to next point. This is important now. Ecosystem structure and function. If you want to study ecosystem chapter, then you need to understand this particular topic, ecosystem structure and function. How actually the organisms are particularly present in this ecological unit and how they are interacting. What are the different stages and how actually they are showing their interest among their own selves and with the environment. Okay, so you need to understand it clearly. Let's get started. First basic point, everyone knows that ecosystem is nothing but a mixture of two things. One as the biotic life, another one as the abiotic things. So the interaction should have to happen between biotic to biotic, that is organism to organism. The interaction should have to happen even from that organism to the thing also. The organism should have to interact with the air, the organism should have to interact with the temperature, the organism should have to interact with the soil, the organism should have to interact with the water. And in this interaction, how actually it is getting benefited, that is the basic point to understand here. Okay, so the whole explanation sets up in only one area, and that is interaction. How they are interacting among themselves and among the other non-living things. That is the first point. Point number 2. As one of the law of physics says that the energy of the universe is constant. It can be transferred, used, converted from one form of energy to another form of energy, but the energy of the universe remains stable and constant. Here also the flow of energy jumps from one organism to another organism, flows from one organism to another organism, and that energy once again stays inside this ecosystem only. It will not leave that particular ecosystem. So the energy flow of that ecosystem stays inside. If there are 10 herbivorous organisms, herbivorous antandre sasyahari, and if there are 3 to 4 carnivorous organisms, carnivorous antandre mamsahari, and the mutual flow of energy between these two kinds of organisms will always be the same. If there is a deletion of some of the herbivorous organisms, means there will be automatically deletion of less amounts of carnivorous organisms also. So one or the other day, the nature never makes itself to be less in any of the quantities. It will always be making some more herbivorous organisms, and it will be always creating some more plants in those particular areas. So that once again higher amount of plants, lesser amount of herbivores, and two lesser amount of carnivores. Okay, every single thing is interconnected here. Okay, the point number 2 is the flow of energy here stays inside the ecosystem only. If we want to talk about the species composition of this particular ecosystem, then we need to say a simple thing. How many types of organisms are there in that ecosystem? And how many number of those individual organisms are there in this ecosystem? The identification and enumeration of different types of species of that ecosystem gives us the ecosystem richness or the ecosystem composition. It may be 10, it may be 30, it may be 100, it may be 200. How will you decide this? You'll be deciding only when you understand how many organisms are there. You cannot say that there are only simply organisms. You should be saying that how many these type of organisms, how many those type of organisms, how many smaller organisms, how many larger organisms, how many herbivorous organisms, and how many carnivorous organisms. When you calculate these number of organisms, then only you'll get an idea about the species composition of that ecosystem. Done, sir? We'll go to the fourth point here. Not only this ecosystem, the entire world is under different grades, different levels. Not only the forest, not only the ecosystems, not only the world's different areas, you can consider even among ourselves also, we have got stages, we have got grades in our life. If I'm a teacher, I'm working in one of the PUC colleges, means there are divisions, there are grades. There will be a peon, there will be a clerk, there will be a person who teaches the subject, and there will be head of the department of that particular subject. There will be a principal, and on top of everything there will be a chairman or president, etc., etc. Likewise, there are grades even in our ecosystems also. There is a distribution of organisms in the vertical fashion. Try to understand my sentences here. I want to give you a basic idea of one of the word. I'll let you know. A vertical distribution of organisms depending upon their species richness is called as the stratification. Strata, a level, a grade, a position. Okay, so if you want to consider by taking an example called as the forest. In the forest, the tallest trees, the trees or the bigger masculine trees have got the highest position on top of it. And if you go to shrubs, they come to a lower positions, lower levels. And if you go to the grasses, they occupy only the bottom places. Okay, I just want to say that in case of the ecosystems, there will be vertical distribution of organisms depending upon their species richness and composition. And if they are higher in a number, and if the trees, as I said in forest ecosystem, the trees occupy the topmost position, and if you come downward to those trees, you'll see shrubs, you'll see herbs, and from to the bottom you'll see the grasses, etc., etc. These are the grades depending upon their richness and depending upon their strength and depending upon their capacity, depending upon the species composition. They have got these kind of grades. So once again I'm saying you, this is called as stratification. What do you mean by stratification? It is nothing but vertical distribution of organisms depending upon their composition and the richness. I need to tell you 4 points here. 4 points. These are the functional aspects of an ecosystem. Point number 1, productivity. Point number 2, decomposition. Point number 3, energy flow. And point number 4, cycling of nutrients. Remember students, these are the 4 essential, very most important points of this chapter. I'm saying point number 1 as productivity, point number 2 as decomposition, point number 3 as flow of energy, and point number 4, that is nutrient cycling. First one, productivity. Productivity. Consider there is a plant and this plant utilizes the sunlight, and after utilizing sunlight it undergoes a process called as photosynthesis. That is, with respect to sunlight, it uses that chemical energy and conversion of that chemical energy into an usable energy source, and we generally call it as photosynthesis. Everyone knows about it. That is called as primary productivity, that it has produced some amount of energy or biomass in its body. Now this primary productivity, the whole world is dependent on this. This primary productivity is being eaten by some more organisms here. Remember, I'm talking about autotrophs, the producers, and from the producers it is jumping to another organism called as the consumer. Let us go to a rabbit. A rabbit eats this one, and the product from this particular body enters into that particular body. Now when the rabbit eats these plants, we can say that there is flow of energy. It is a common thing, right? So when the energy flown, of course that energy once again doubles in the body of particular organism, that is rabbit, and once again this rabbit is eaten by some more organism. Okay, and this energy, this biomass will be entering into another organism, and if that carnivorous organism dies, then what will happen? It should have to undergo the process called as decomposition, wherein which the bacteria, wherein which the fungus, these 2 types of organisms will feed on this dead and decaying matter and dissolve the nutrients from that body and allow that nutrients to enter into the soil stream. And in the soil, each and everything percolates, and from those minerals, from those nutrients, it will be absorbed by the plants, and those plants once again regaining these particular nutrients grow. So the productivity is done by the plants, flow of energy done by the different organisms. When they die, they undergone decomposition, and finally that energy is once again in the form of nutrients. It is recycling that particular ecosystem. So these are the 4 different categories. We need to understand it all the time. So though it is appearing tough in the form of English, it is very easy to understand. Okay sir, so let's enter into the next topic here, and that topic is pond ecosystem. In this chapter they have given pond ecosystem just to explain the structure and function of ecosystem. So from the previous table or classification chart, can you tell me in which category the pond ecosystem comes? It comes in the freshwater ecosystem, and that comes in the aquatic ecosystem, and that comes in the natural ecosystem. And that natural ecosystem is nothing but the world's global ecosystems, one of the part. First basic thing about the pond ecosystem is that it is a self-sustainable ecosystem. What do you mean by self-sustainable? Self-swanta, sustainable, samarthaniya. ತನ್ನಿಂದ ತಾನೇ ಸಮರ್ಥಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. It can say about itself that if there are producers, I'll create it, and if there are consumers, I'll create it, and if there is a flow of energy from producers to consumers, I'll look about it, and if there is a decrease in the number of producers, I'll create them, and if there is an increase in the number of consumers, I'll decrease them. So that itself explains that this is nothing but the self-sustainable product. It can maintain itself, right? So it is a shallow water body. Shallow means not so deep. Alavallada. Shallow water body wherein which we can see the toughest ecological interactions among the organisms. That is the interaction between biotic and non-biotic life. Okay, let's go further and we'll see how to explain it. First of all, let me divide this pond ecosystem into two categories, and they are abiotic things and biotic life. If you consider, see that picture, if you consider the abiotic content of this pond ecosystem, you concentrate. You see here, the first thing is about the water. In the water, there will be dissolving of organic and inorganic components inside. The second point is the rich soil which is present at the bottom of it. And this rich soil once again contains those essential minerals and nutrients in it. Of course, there is a rate of production. Of course, there is a rate of function. Of course, there is a rate of productivity in this particular ecosystem. And on what factors this productivity depends? Come on, think about it. The productivity of this particular ecosystem depends on, point number one, it depends on the solar input, the amount of sunlight entering the pond ecosystem. Point two, the cycle of temperature. More number of biotic life, consumer life, increases the temperature of water. More number of the producer life in the aquatic ecosystem decreases the temperature, because more number of consumers, then more number of metabolic activities and more number of eating and more number of feeding, etc., which increases the temperature. So this temperature increases and decreases. The one which was decreased, it comes to increased mode, and the one which was increased, which comes to decreased mode. So there is a cycle of temperature which if continuously changes, and this ecosystem gets adapted to that. Point 3, day length. Every ecosystem doesn't have the equal kind of days or the length of that particular day. If you have 24 hours in a day, it does not mean that all those 24 hours we are getting only the sunlight, or it cannot be said in other terms that all the 24 hours will be having only the darker modes. No, in some places the sunlight will be for 18 hours, in some places it will be for 20 hours, in some places it is only of 16 hours. Okay, different places and different sunlight exposure, temperature exposure and day lengths. Okay, so it depends on it. Point number 4, other climate conditions such as the precipitation, etc. Okay, so dear students, I mentioned 4 points. The structure and functionality, productivity of the ecosystem depends on, point number 1, the amount of sunlight entering the ecosystem and leaving the ecosystem. Point number 2, the changes in the temperature which are happening in the ecosystem. Point number 3, the length of the day affects the ecosystem. Point number 4, precipitation, wind, soil, some other factors affecting the ecosystem. Okay, these are the 4 to 5 different varieties of points which can influence the rate of ecosystem in a decreased way or in the increased way. Now let us go to the next point, that is the biotic life. Until this time we discussed only the abiotic content. Now we'll start discussing about the biotic life. After that only we can say that there is the mutual relationship or interaction between biotic and abiotic, right? So let us go to the biotic life. To all the ecosystem patterns, we need to understand the first thing is that the ecosystem contains, in case of abiotic life, first one should be the producers. Second one should be the consumers, and third one should be the decomposers. I repeat, producers, consumers, decomposers. Let me give you some of the examples for producers. First basic question, what do you mean by producer? Producers are nothing but autotrophs, such as plants, which can produce their own food for their growth and development. Consumers are also called as heterotrophs, which are completely dependent on producers or some other organisms for their growth and development. Producers are independent, consumers are dependent. And what are decomposers? Decomposers are those organisms which feed on dead and decaying matter. Okay, sir. So these 3 types of biotic life. let us go to the examples of it. What are the different components of the producers here? Some examples such as phytoplanktons, some algae, floating and submerged plants. Now the point here, what do you mean by the planktons? Dear students, please do mark it, write it separately. What are planktons? These are the freely floating structures or floating organisms. Float, telado. Floating structures which are present generally on the top layer of that ecosystem. Aquatic layer. Understanding, sir? Aquatic, top layer, aquatic layer. They are called as planktons. They are generally what? Floating organisms. They are called as the planktons. Okay, so if they are microscopic plants in nature, they are called as phytoplanktons, and if they are microscopic animals are there, then they are called as zooplanktons. Understanding, sir? So once again I repeat, planktons are nothing but floating organisms. Okay, going to the consumers, and these are dependent on producers, and these consumers eat the producers. Okay, so what are the different examples? Go to the table. Zooplanktons, free swimming bottom dwelling forms. Now we understood zooplanktons. Zooplanktons, what are those? Zoo, the animals. Planktons are the floating structures. Okay, now another word comes here, that is the freely swimming organisms. These are also called as nectons. Nektons, nectons. They are planktons and these are nectons. Planktons are the floating structures, nectons are swimming structures. Okay, let's enter into the third category. They are called as decomposers. Generally, in case of decomposers, we add two specialized life forms. First one as the fungus and another one as the bacteria. Some examples, flagellates, they've added the extra one. But these are the generally 2-3 varieties which come as the decomposers. Remember, producers produce the food. By utilizing the sunlight, undergoing photosynthesis, they produce the food. Now this food is being eaten by the consumers. So consumers eat the producers. And when the consumers die, they undergo decomposition. That is, the fungus and bacteria feed on these dead organisms. They take up all the nutrients, they take up all the minerals, they take up all the organic and inorganic contents from it, and once again those things will be present inside the water and in the soil, and they will cycle there only. Okay, so here we have seen the productivity, here we have seen the flow of energy, here we have seen the decomposition, and here we have seen the cycling of the nutrients. Okay, so this is the bestest example to explain about the pond ecosystem with respect to ecosystem structure and function. Now you can understand how actually the abiotic content follows on biotic life, how actually these are interconnected, and how actually the flow of interaction takes place among these. Understanding, students? Right. So this is about a basic introduction about its structure and function. I hope you understood it. In the next class, I'll bring another video continuation of this one.